Today we're going to make some text. It's going to look like we have a piece of leather that is stitched, and it's going to look like some distressed leather. It takes a lot of steps, but it's not too hard, and we're going to have fun. So I'm going to create a new document. The very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make this document 1800 pixels wide, 1200 pixels tall, and resolution 72, and the background contents, we can just have those be white, and I'll go ahead and click OK. Now, I am going to use this document, but I'm also going to be opening up other documents. So I'm going to go File, Open, and I'm going to go into my folder, and I'm going to find the document called Distressed Leather 9, and go ahead and open that up. I'll go Control A or Command A on a Mac, Control C and copy it, and come back to my original document and paste it in there. Okay? Now, I'm going to come into my tool. I'm going to grab the text tool, and I'm going to use Nandaka Western font, and I'm going to make it 600 points wide. I'll click and type the word West, all in capital letters, and I'm going to move this so that it is centered on my document. Okay? Notice in my layers document it is a text layer and it will say West on it. Okay, now I need a pattern to apply this to, so I'm going to go back here. I don't want this huge pattern here, so I'm going to deselect. I'm going to use the marquee selection tool, and I'm just going to hold down the shift key and select a little square. I will go to Edit, Define, New Pattern, and I'm going to call it Leather. And click OK. Now I'll come back here. In the FX layer, I'm going to click and hold. I'm going to go down to Pattern Overlay. And I will click here and I will select that new pattern that I have. If you see the scale here, if you make this smaller, see how it looks checkerboard? You want to make sure that you adjust it so you don't get your checkerboard going. If some of it shows, that's okay. It's going to hide later, but make it a little bit bigger. And then your opacity, change that to around 65 or 70%. Next, we're going to click right over here. We could click OK and then go back to Effects. Otherwise, we could just go here and click on Color Overlay, and we're going to click and we'll change our color overlay to 433A32, and the opacity is going to stay the same, but our blend mode will change to overlay. And at this point, I think you'll see it starting to look a little bit better. Okay? Now we're going to go, and I clicked OK, that's all right. So we'll go back here and we'll go to Bevel and Emboss, and we'll add a Bevel and Emboss adjustment. The depth is going to be 100. Oh, by the way, let's save us some little work. Let's click on Reset to Default so it changes and we don't have anything left over from before, because sometimes you might change a blend mode that you don't see. So always start with Reset to Default so that it starts off fresh. The depth is going to be 100. The size is 6. The soften is going to be 2 pixels. My angle will be 30. My highlight opacity will be, the altitude will also be 30. The highlight opacity, I'm going to make sure that it is only 20, and my shadow opacity should be set at 50 already. Okay, next we're going to click on Inner Glow. We will change the blend, let's reset it. We're going to change the blend mode to overlay, the opacity to 100%. In the element section here, we're going to change the size to 40 pixels, 440, okay? And now we will go to our drop shadow. And so we're going to click on the drop shadow. And for this, we will reset it to the default. We will change the blend mode to multiply if it's not already there. It should be the opacity to 100%. Angle will now be 120. Distance 5. Spread 0. size 8, and then that's it. That's it for that one. Okay. Now click OK. So now we have something that looks like this. Now, I can still see the box for my pattern overlay. So I'm going to go back to my pattern overlay, and I'm going to click here, and I'm going to switch it to one of my other ones that I made earlier. So sometimes if you make it too small, it just doesn't look as good. So you might need to make that again. But notice that pattern overlay looks a lot better on this one now. We're going to control click on this layer to get it selected. And I'm going to create a new layer and drag it underneath the text layer that I have. I'm going to rename it Shadow 1. Okay, so with that layer selected, I'm going to go to Edit and Fill, and because I have it selected, it's only going to fill those letters, and I want to fill it with black. And click OK. As soon as I do, now keep in mind that it's underneath this layer, so you can't see that. So when you turn it back on, you think, oh, nothing's changed. I'm going to Control D to deselect, but I'm going to go to Filter. And by the way, while we're doing this, let's just hide this so we can see what we're doing here. Let's go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and I'll make it be about 12 pixels. So I'm just giving it a little bit of a shadow. And I'm going to reduce the opacity of that entire layer to about 75%. So it doesn't have to be exact, just about that. Okay? Now, I'm going to change this shadow so it shows a little bit more. So I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, and Warp. And I'm going to move this in a little bit. And maybe move the outside part a little bit out. And then just to make sure I see what it's doing, I'm going to turn on my other layer. And so when I'm doing this, can you see how I've added a shadow? There it is with it, there it is without. So I can see a little bit going, but see how the shadow comes down a little bit more than it did before? All right, I'm going to duplicate that layer, and I'm going to go to Control T, which is the same thing as Edit, Transform, and I am going to, well, I need to make sure I go to Edit, Warp on that one, and so I'm going to pull that one out a little bit more, and maybe pull this one up a little bit so I get a little bit more going. And this time, so I've warped it, I've expanded it just a little bit more than I did before. I could even pull this up a little bit, and I'll click OK. You know what, let's do it at the bottom too. Let's pull that out. And then click OK. And then this one right here, we're going to reduce this one to about 30%. Okay, so we have a gradual layer, one of them stronger than the other one. Okay, this is a good time to check to make sure that your text layer is above the two shadow layers. All right, next I'm going to get my brush ready to go. I'm going to come here to my brushes tool, and I'm going to come and click on the brush, and I'm going to load this brush set. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to come down to Import Brushes. Now again, these will be in our files, and you'll have to save them to your computer, and you're going to find that brush set, and you're going to click and click Load, and they will come in then. And in here, there are several brush sets. Some of them are like baseball stitches and some other ones. We're going to scroll down until we find the 9th one down. So 1, 2, 3, let's see. Yep, it is the 9th one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it's this backwards /1. Now be aware that he named them all brushes, whoever made these. They're all called Stitch. So sometimes if they give them a name, it's a little bit better. Just remember that if you ever make a brush set, name them so people know which one you're talking about. So we're using this backwards one. We're going to change the brush size to 17. And I'm just going to leave it right there. I'm not going to use it right now. Okay. So in the meantime, we're going to come back over here to our original text layer, and we're going to Control click. So I've got the selection again. I'm going to go to Select, Modify, Contract, and I'm going to contract this by 10 pixels. So it shrunk in a little bit. Okay. Now I'm going to switch to the Marquee tool. And anywhere on my document, I'm going to just right-click and say Make Work Path. I will choose 1 for a tolerance and click OK. So now I created this. And if you know anything about paths, if you look in the Paths palette, I've just created a path, a work path over here. But I'm not going to worry about that right now. All right. Let's make a new layer. It should be on top of your original text layer. I'm going to switch to the pen tool, and I'm going to right-click anywhere in the document, and I'm going to come down to Stroke, Path, and I'm going to choose Brush. If it's not already chosen, you'll choose Brush and Simulate Path. Simulate Pressure, rather, sorry. And click OK. Now, it doesn't look a whole lot of anything because what I really did is I just made black stitches, but you can't see it. So now I'm going to go to the, and by the way, this is going to be my stitches layer. I'm going to call it Stitches so I can keep track of it later. I'm going to go to Effects and Bevel and Emboss. I've got to reset to the default first so I don't change anything, or I don't have anything left over from before. My depth will be 100%. My size will be 4. My soften will remain 0. Angle is 30. Altitude is 30. Highlight opacity will up to 75. And the shadow opacity will be 75. So now it's starting to look like something, but we want them to be a different color. So we're going to click on Overlay, Color Overlay rather. I'm going to change the blend mode to normal, and I'm going to change the color of this to BAA 27C. And so it's a nice tan color, and I'll click OK, and I'll click OK. And if you look at this, this is what we've got so far. If I click off that work path, there's what I got. So it's looking pretty cool. Now I want to add some fanciness to this. So I'm going to open up another document I've already pre-made for you. I'm going to go to File, Open, and you're going to look for the document called Western Embellishments, and you'll go ahead and click Open. Now what I've got here is a little design, and if you don't want to use that design, I suppose you could use something else. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go Control A to select all, Control C to copy, and I'm going to take it back into my original document and Control V to paste so it looks like this. I'm going to resize this thing, so I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, and Scale, and I'm going to resize this and move this down, and I've got to figure out how big I'm going to make it so that it fits, so it's centered and right at the bottom where I want that to show up. Once I got it the way I like it, I'm going to commit that layer. Now it's time to create a path. So I'm going to go over here to my Paths palette, and I'm going to click to make a new path. And I'm going to switch to my pen tool, and I will click, and I will make this new pen tool. Now this may take you a little bit of work, and that's okay. You'll get used to it. I know I make it a little bit easier because I've been doing it for years, but you don't have to do it perfect, that's for sure. Okay? Once I've got this path, this is the important part. I've got it. I'm going to click off of it and then click back on it again, so select it, and therefore I can start drawing another path on the same layer again. Now, I don't like how that turned out, so I'm going to have to use the direct selection tool and adjust that a little bit so it lines up a little bit better. And you guys are going to have to do that quite a bit. Click off of it, click back on it again, and now I can add the final path on this. And again, I can adjust it as needed. Okay, so I just have the path, and if you need to go back and adjust this so it lines up a little bit better, you can. All right. Now that I have that path has been saved, now I'm going to click back over to my layers palette. Now notice the path is selected. I'm going to click back over to my layers palette, and I'm going to click on the brush tool again. And I need to make sure that I have that brush set the way I want. It is 17 points. It is the 9th one down. That's great. I'm going to, in the layers palette here, remember this layer right here is my embellishment design that I have. I'm just going to click and create a new layer. I can hide that layer that I brought the embellishments over, and I'm going to go in my layer that I just created, and I'm going to call it embellishments. And I didn't spell it right. It doesn't matter. I'm the only one who's going to see it, except for you guys, of course. Okay, so I am going to, with the pen tool selected, I'm going to right click and say stroke path again. Actually, I've got to make sure it said stroke subpath, so I've got to click off it and make sure I've got all the paths selected. Now, right click and say stroke path. So if it said subpath, you only have the one path selected. So I'm going to click and say stroke, and there I've got those again, those stitches again. And again, they're black and they don't quite match, but watch how we fix these. I'm going to Alt click on a Mac, it would be an Option click. So I'm going to Alt click and drag and drop those effects right on top. And so I just copied all of those effects all at one time. Okay. All right, so we've got the embellishments layer created, and I'm going to click on this embellishments layer and I'm going to drag it to the new layer icon to make a copy of it. If you wanted to, you can rename this embellishments 2. And then we're going to rotate that by going to Edit, Transform, and we're going to flip it vertically. And so now I make a copy of that. I'm going to grab the Move tool. Whoops, I grabbed the wrong one. Let's turn off Auto Select so I don't grab it by mistake. I'll make sure I have Embellishments 2 selected, and I'm going to click and move that up here. Now at this point, if you need to move those around so that they're centered a little bit, you can always do that. Just click on it, click on the Move tool, and again, turn off Auto Select. If you Auto Select turn on, it might grab the background layer or grab the wrong layer instead. All right. Now we're ready to add the stars. So we're going to create a new layer, and I am going to switch to the Polygon tool. And again, I'm going to right click and reset that tool so that I start off fresh. By default, it wants to do a five-sided shape. However, I want to make sure that I'm drawing a star. So I am going to click and hold on here, and I'm going to come down to, see, I clicked on the gear, and I'm going to come down to star and click. And then you can go ahead and leave this, how do you indent this stuff. You can adjust that later if you want, but right now I'm not going to. Before I do this, I am going to name this star so that star, so I remember what I've got here. And with the black selected, I'm just going to click. Star always draws from the center, so I'm going to click and drag and put that little star in there so it looks like this. Now, see how it's drawing a shape? And I've got the smart object, a little shape thing there too. I don't want that, so I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to make sure that I choose here. I want to make sure I choose pixels because I do not want to have that. So let's try that again and click and drag. And I'm going to make that shape. And again, it's black, but that's okay. I'm going to go to the Effects panel. And I'm going to come to Overlay. For the overlay, I'm going to change the color to 22170C. So I've got a nice dark brown color. And my opacity, I'm going to make it about 90%. So it's a little bit darker brown, but not completely dark brown. I'm then going to add an inner shadow. The inner shadow will be, the opacity will be 75% of it. Let's reset that to its default. We're going to make this 75%. And the color, I will make it 22170C again. And the angle will be 30 degrees. Distance should be 5. Choke is 0. Size is 7. Now let's click on drop shadow and add a drop shadow to this layer. The drop shadow again, let's reset it to the default. I'm going to make the opacity 25%, the angle 30, distance 6, spread is 0, and the size will be 4 pixels. Okay, so now my star has just a little bit of a stamped look on that leather. I'm going to duplicate this layer and move it. I'll duplicate that layer, switch the move tool, and I'm going to move that over to here. And again, I'm going to duplicate it again and move that down here and duplicate it one more time and move that over there. Now you can take some time to adjust those and make them go exactly where you want them to go. All right, I took some time and I rearranged those and made them line up a little bit better. I've got so many layers going on here in the layers palette. First of all, I'm going to condense these and make them a little bit smaller. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to select the first one, hold down the Shift key, select the last one, and I'm going to come up here and I'm going to say New Group from Layers, and I'm going to call this the Embellishments layer. I'll call it the Embellishments group and click OK, just so that I just had too many layers going. If I need to adjust those layers, I can always open these up and adjust them one at a time, but right now it's just going to keep it a little bit neat and tidy. Okay, I'm going to create a new layer above this. I'm going to call it Light Source. Okay. I'm going to flip-flop my colors. I'm going to use a big white brush. I'm going to make sure I switch back to the regular default brushes. General, we're going to choose a soft round brush, and I'm going to make it nice and big. Crying out loud. Okay, let's make it about 700. Okay, maybe 900. Okay, so I'm going to go here, and I'm going to click right in the middle, and I'm just going to, with my full pressure, full opacity, I'm going to click right here in the center, one big whack with that light to create light source. But then I'm going to change that blend mode to overlay, so it now interacts with it. So you can see the center of that is a little bit lighter. Okay, now we're going to create another layer, and we're going to call this Shadows. Okay, now I'm going to press X on my keyboard, which flip-flop my colors, and I'm going to paint some dark edges. So I'm going to go smaller here, and I like to adjust my flow to make it a little bit darker, and I'm just going to come around here and create some darkness around the edges. Okay, and then if I make it full size again, you see it looks like this. And again, change the blend mode to overlay, and the opacity is a little bit strong for my taste, so we're going to take it down to about 50%. Okay? All right, now this is going to be fun. We're going to create a gradient map. Okay, so we're going to create a gradient map overlay. So we're going to come down here to the half black, half white circle. We're going to click and hold, come down to gradient map. And that should have forced my properties panel to open up. So I'm going to click in here, and I'm going to create a new color here. I'm going to put purple on one side and orange on the other. And you can see that when I'm doing this, I'm going, what in the world is she doing? It's starting to get kind of crazy. But, and again, we can make that layers panel show a little bit better. We're going to change the blend mode of this again to overlay. And then we're going to reduce the opacity of it to around 30%. So we just get just a hint of it. And so now it kind of gives us this look of the old Wild West. And there we have it. We are done.